Frank. Tēnā koutou te whanau o Unitarians o Tamaki Makoto. Tēnā koutou nā manahiri. No mai, haere mai, me ki tēnei whare karakia o te atua. Ko te Zorn toko ingoa. No Charleston, South Carolina, USA, aho. Ko Kupa River te awa. E noho ana aho ke Tamaki Makoto. Mana aki whenua, mana aki tangata, haere whakamua. No reira, e ro rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome all, church whānau and visitors, to this place of worship, virtual and physical, made sacred by our coming together today and by gatherings of Auckland Unitarians here for more than 122 years. Consider this time together a sanctuary for the soul, a haven of peace and hope. It's a time to reflect on what it means to be human, what it means to be part of the interconnected web of all existence, and how we spend our time together and independently on this earth. Welcome to those joining us remotely, to those here in the building, and to those watching the recording at a later time. If this is your first time here, or your 101st time here, we're glad you're here. If you carry the weight of a weary world on your shoulders, or you entered through the door with a song in your heart and a skip in your step, you are welcome here. If you are the loudest voice in the town square, or the subtle hand behind the scene, we are glad you are here. If you have failed once or 1,000 times, we are glad you are here. If you sing like angels, or you mumble behind the hymnal, we are glad you are here. This community is what it is because of your presence. So welcome into this space of love, support, justice, fellowship, and worship. We are glad you are here. My name's Ted Zorn, and I'll be leading our service today. My friend Mal Green will deliver the main talk today, and I'll say more about Mal later in the service. The whakatoki that I mentioned in my introduction, mana aki whenua, mana aki tangata, haere whakamua, means care for the land, care for the people, go forward, which I thought was fitting for our service today, the theme of which is Humanizing Christianity. After the service, please join us if you can for morning tea. It is our sacrament of hospitality, and it won't be the same without you. So our opening words are by Gretchen Haley, entitled Surrender to This Life, which Corrine has agreed to read for us. Thanks, Corrine.
Surrender to this life. Give up the fight for some other moment, some other life than here. And now give up the longing for some other world, the wishing for other choices to make, other songs to sing, other bodies, other ages, other countries, other stakes. Purge the past, forgive the future, for each come too soon. Surrender only to this life, this day, this hour, not because it does not constantly break your heart, but because it also beckons with beauty, startles with delight, if only we keep waking up. This is the gift we have been given, these body clothes, this heartbreak, this pulse, this breath, this light, these friends, this hope. Here we remember ourselves, all a part of it all, giving thanks together.
Thanks, Corrine. Time for our chalice lighting. Again, I didn't prepare for this part. Rachel, would you please help out? We light this chalice with an open heart. We light this chalice with resolve. We light this chalice with tears still fresh on our cheeks. We light this chalice in hope, a tiny flame we nurture. We light this chalice with reverence for this place, these people, this time. We light this chalice with all our souls longing to be who we are, to be who we will become, to be ourselves. We light this chalice in self-love, giving love, holy love. Now, if I can ask Paul to put the words to the covenant on the screen, and I'll ask those of you who wish to say the words with me. Not those words. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is the sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. Our reading for today is a poem called Being Human by Shreya Dristi, and it's one that Mal, our speaker, recommended to me and that I really like. I hope you do. Seriously, guys, this is what I can't buy. Like dogs, why do we fight? When we can be kind and care, why are people's souls filled with spite? When love can fill the air. We are all originally simple human beings. We all have feelings. That one special gift God has bestowed upon us graciously. That one special gift that separates the monkey and me. But are we being the good humans we are expected to be? Are we, to put it simply, being human? Because if we're not, then we should learn. If not, we'll never yearn to be human. Open our eyes, ears, hearts, and souls to learn to be human. Because we are human, truly. So we should be, obviously, and write our own destiny. When our inner realization sparks, we should know in our hearts that we've made a mistake. We would know that, hey, why do we discriminate? Why did we constantly hate? When we all have blood of red, which we often forget. When we all have two eyes, a mouth, and two ears. When we humans all have the capacity to fill oceans, lakes, and streams with our innocent tears. So, step by step, hand in hand, let us take a firm stand to bring back, to rekindle our beautiful world. When humanity is lost, we would not recover. We would not be able to bear the price, the cost, when love is over. Lost with pointless battles and wars, lost due to endless violence and brawls, there would be no return. So we should learn, once again, to be human. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Mal Green. As mentioned, Mal is a friend and he's also a colleague of mine at Massey University in the School of Communication, Journalism, and Marketing, where he's a senior tutor. So among other things, many other things, Mal has been a high school teacher, a journalist, youth worker, media production manager and writer, director of a youth organization, board member of community development organizations, event organizer, and a social justice advocate for immigrant communities and diverse sexual orientation and gender identity communities. Mal's doctoral thesis and much of his current work focuses on cultural inclusivity. He's also a regular contributor to the blog of Red Letter Christians, a group committed to living out Jesus's countercultural teachings. I should also mention Mal is a celebrant and was the celebrant at my daughter's wedding a couple of years ago. He's also one of the kindest and most generous people I know, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy getting to know him as I have. Now.
Tēnā koutou katoa. ko Tarana, ko Aorana, ko Ingarangi, te whakapaparanga mai. So my background is I'm a fifth generation descendant of Scottish, Irish and English immigrants to Aotearoa. Some would call me a pure British mongrel. Ko Awaraka te Maunga, I was born in the shadow of Mount Albert. Engari ko Titirangi te whenua tupu, but I grew up in Titirangi, so I'm a Westie. I have got black trousers on, but they're not the tight black trousers I grew up wearing as a true blue Westie with my black t-shirt. Inene te Aniwa te Kainga. I am now living in Northcote on the North Shore. So that's a little bit about me and where I connect. I was saying to Ted, I was interested seeing some family names there that I recognise. And so ko Penman, ko Kuni, te Hapu. So I come from a family group of Coonies and Penmans. That's where my immigrant roots go back to predominantly. Ko Green, ko Clark te whānau. So Dad was a Green from the Penman side, and my mother was a Clark from the Cooney side. So I say this because as I move around the country from time to time and occasionally speak, people go, oh, so you're from that family and that. Oh, I knew, and connections are made, which is the whole point of pepaha in Te Ao Māori and in the tradition and kaupapa Māori that we are blessed to have in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you this morning. I was saying to Ted, it's now over 16 years since I went to a church service and indeed spoke in a church. So it's other than for funerals or weddings when I speak. So it's lovely to be back with a community again like this on a Sunday morning, and brings back some good memories, not all good, which I may refer to as I go through my talk this morning. Also, I just want to pass on my thanks again from the advocacy and social justice group and community that I'm now a member of called Incedo. Some years ago we were working for Auckland Pride, and we were basically the team that made the Pride Parade work on the ground in the background. So we pulled together our community from all over New Zealand, and we didn't have anywhere to go to sort of do our planning. And one of our leaders contacted you lovely people, and you said, of course, come on in. And this became our base for that weekend, and we had a lovely time being in this beautiful space, both for our times of reflection and meditation and our times of planning and jolly hard work as we help make the Pride Parade something that works. So thank you, folks. It's lovely to be back here. So today I want to perhaps just give a little bit of my spiritual whakapapa. Where have I been? I was born into the evangelical orientation of Christianity. So I was born into a family that was embedded in this tradition. What's more, they weren't just embedded in the evangelical tradition, they were embedded into the missionary angle of it. And so the number of missionaries and pastors amongst my relatives is almost beyond counting, including I became a missionary and pastor as part of that tradition. When I think about my evangelical beginnings, the motif that seems to most have been present was what I would call vindictive. The idea that there was a deity who, if you did good, things went well for you. You got a reward, but woe betide you if you did things that weren't according to what was good and right, and that you were punished. And it seemed, in a sense, quite vindictive. To me, when I reflect, God was judgemental. The world was evil. Humans were depraved. But thank God Jesus was divine. And that was pretty much what I grew up with and worked in for probably 30 or so years. But then, well, actually, just a bit of the expression of that. Ted's referred to some of the things that I've done in my life. A lot of those have been in the context of that evangelical missionary sort of orientation. So I ran youth clubs, I put on concerts. Every month used to fill the Auckland town hall with these concerts as part of this evangelical mission outreach thing. Did tours with bands and performing art groups. Helped run a church, wrote pamphlets that were used for all sorts of campaigns, if you like, in this tradition. But then along the way, I added to this the Pentecostal orientation of evangelical Christianity. And when I think about that, the dominating motif in that particular expression of evangelical Christianity, I would say, was triumphalist. And in this sort of tradition, or this orientation, we had an interventionist, omnipotent deity who could miraculously solve anything and everything, except they hardly ever did. And so I had to live with this sort of, for years in this Pentecostal orientation of believing in this God who all we had to do was, pray with the right formula and miracles would happen and things would be solved. But actually, it didn't always happen. In fact, more often than not, it seemed it didn't happen. But we just conveniently pushed those aside and had an explanation for them, because our triumphalist orientation was that in the end we were going to conquer, that this version of spirituality was going to reign supreme. So in that particular orientation, I took part in healing meetings, exorcisms, and some of you may have heard, but I think I would say somewhat gladly, the reputation of this particular figure has dwindled over the last few years. But there was a gentleman called Bill Subritsky, who was a lawyer and then a property developer, Universal Homes, and then became an evangelist specialising in this Pentecostal orientation of evangelical Christianity. Well, I was one of Bill's helpers. So I recall various events and meetings, and now with some at least chagrin, if not horror, some of the things that went on in those meetings and events as I thought I was embedded in this wonderful expression of spirituality. Well, these spiritual orientations, evangelicalism and Pentecostalism, emphasised the importance of being saved. And I remember, back in the day, some sort of sarcastic and ironic people quite rightly put up, Jesus saves underneath at the ASB. Because, they thought, well, what do you mean Jesus saves? What are we being saved for? Well, of course, we were being saved from the evil world. We were being saved from depraved humans. We were being saved from our sinful self. The emphasis was on an imagined world to come, a world that was variously called heaven, or the new heavens, or the new earth. And this existence here was something merely to be tolerated and battled through in the hope and expectations that everything would be perfect in this world to come, either after death or when the Messiah returned again. Well, the problem I increasingly had to grapple with as I studied theology, as I taught theology, as a seminary teacher and professor and so on, I had to grapple with the discovery and awareness that in the Judeo-Christian scriptures there were portraits of a loving, caring, compassionate deity. And there were declarations of the beauty and goodness of the world. And there were assertions of the nobility and wonderfulness of humans. And there was acknowledgement that not everything was solved or solvable. And so this tension was growing within me. The more I became immersed in my theological studies and my theological teaching and my leadership and my preaching. And I guess the reading that Ted read, Being Human, captures something of the struggles I went through in my journey out of evangelical Pentecostal Christianity. And if I think back, probably one of the defining moments in this journey and a moment of realization was my wife and I used to run an Easter art exhibition in the church building or in the community building that we had helped our church community buy and set up over on the North Shore. And part of it was that every Easter we would have a community art exhibition based around the tradition of the Stations of the Cross. And part of that was we had a fully functioning cafe, they still have. I mean, it's still going, the community centre. It's one of the things that I'm most grateful for, having walked away from it, that they've maintained at least that aspect of that expression. And we would have a cafe and we would invite people after the art exhibition to come up and just have conversations. And my role was to write little pamphlets that were discussion starters. Well, I think it came to a head about 16 years ago at the Easter art exhibition when I was putting a pamphlet together and I was trying to encourage conversations on looking at the figure of Jesus, who was central to this whole Easter story, in a different light. To try and, if you like, humanize Jesus a bit more. And I came across this delightful cartoon, well, I thought it was delightful, cartoon that had a chocolate bunny, Easter bunny, on a cross with its ear obviously chewed off, and underneath was the statement, "Forgive them, for they know not what they chew." And I had produced this little pamphlet with a little bit of commentary to encourage people to consider the figure of Jesus might be more than just what the evangelical Pentecostal tradition had presented the figure as. Well, you can imagine the reaction that got. And I think, yeah, that was probably one of the defining moments for my journey out of that tradition. And I realised that increasingly I had been becoming more humanist in my spirituality. And the dominating motif that I was discovering, which Ted has referred to, was the focus of my PhD project, was inclusivity. The idea of a spirituality that was inclusive and embracing and welcoming. And it just made more sense than the evangelical and Pentecostal orientations I had been following for most of my life. And following Jesus became following an example of humanity with a humanizing mission. I discovered that this spiritual orientation emphasizes being part of a world here and now, to enjoy, to engage, to make a contribution to. And the opening words that Corinne read for us express this beautifully, what I was discovering as I moved more into this humanist orientation. So when I talk about humanizing, what do I mean? What does it mean for me to be humanizing? I was thrilled to look through the various documents that Ted shared with me from the Unitarian Universalist community on humanism and the principles of the community, and find resonance with the understanding of humanizing that I have been trying to enact and express over the past 20 years. So, humanizing for me? Well, here's a few things that humanizing involves for me. Firstly, self-actualization. Attaining and encouraging others to attain their potential as humans and discover fulfillment and significance. And that's been one of the thrilling things of my life. Interestingly, when I came to this realization, I looked back at the journey of my life since late teenage years, and even in the context of evangelical and Pentecostal mission, realized that had actually been one of the defining aspects of all my activity, was self-actualization, helping people attain their potential as humans and discover fulfillment and significance. So, first one, self-actualization. Second, compassion. Compassion for all, especially those on the margins. And I thank my family for that, because even though they were embedded in this evangelical tradition, my grandmother in particular, on my mother's side, and my parents were always welcoming into our home people on the margins. And I remember growing up as a child with people living in our home, alcoholics, solo mums, what have you, living in our home. So compassion is another key thing for me when it comes to talking about humanizing. The third thing, respect. Respect for my and others' worth and dignity. To me, this is a key element of what it means for me to be humanizing. The fourth thing, accept. This involves suspending judgment. Suspending judgment of people and situations and things around me. The next element of humanizing for me is advocacy. Being an advocate for individuals, groups, and for systemic justice for all is, to me, part of what it means for me to engage in humanizing. And finally, nourish. Nourishing those around me in situations in which I'm involved, improving the human condition. So, humanizing. What does it mean for me to be a humanizing follower of Jesus? Well, as I mentioned, while 16 years ago was probably a defining moment in my coming out as a humanist, it started earlier than that, and it was probably a process of 20 years of being on this journey of moving from the evangelical Pentecostal orientation that I had been embedded in to a more humanist orientation. Well, along that journey, because I am occasionally a speaker, a bit of a writer, a poster in a few online publications and so on, I encountered challenge and pushback from former colleagues, congregants, friends and family still embedded in the evangelical and Pentecostal traditions. So this got me thinking, how can I respond to these pushbacks from these people in these traditions? And so I turned to the foundation of their belief system, which is the Judeo-Christian scripture. And as I mentioned, I had spent so much time in this tradition, if you like, and in this source of meaning and understanding of life, the Judeo-Christian scriptures, as a Christian pastor, elder, missionary, leader, seminary teacher, and writer. So why not go back and look there for an answer to my critics? And here's what I found. At the beginning of the Jewish and Christian scriptures, the creation myth consistently emphasizes that humans are made in the image of the Creator. The humans created were judged by the Creator to be the perfect expression of humanity due to their unimpeded relationship with their Creator, as the myth portrays it. The story of the fall is a description of the perfect humans being seduced into believing that independent self-preservation was the point, which is the serpent's tantalizing offer to supposedly this figure of Eve, the female expression of humanity. So this offer of being, independent self-preservation as the point of life was opposed to the communal care of all people to enable them to experience the humanity with which the Creator had imbued them, which, one reading of those first 3 chapters of the Genesis account of the origins of the world and humanity suggests strongly that the idea of the creation of the human was to create this community of care for all people so that they could enjoy this experience of being truly human. Well, over the next few thousand years, according to the Old Testament writings, people identified as prophets were portrayed as calling those who claimed to follow this Creator Yahweh to return to treating people as human and stop treating some or many of them like animals to be used and abused for personal gain and preservation. And that's a possible reading of the prophetic statements throughout the Old Testament record, moving from Moses right through to the final books of the Old Testament scriptures. In other words, the call was to humanize others, to enable people to have an experience as close as possible to that of the first humans before the fall in the Jewish creation myth. Well then, as I kept on looking into the Jewish and Christian scriptures, I became aware that the prophet project, if you like, that went on for hundreds of years manifestly failed to bring people back to the Creator's vision of humanity. And so the New Testament scriptures announce a new strategy. And the new strategy is using the terms new creation, new Adam, Son of God, and oneness of the Father and Son. They indicate the presentation of a repeat, perfect expression of humanity from the Creator. And this expression provided a perfect example of humanity for people to follow through his supposed uninterrupted communion with the Creator. Moreover, this expression of perfect humanity included the ability to lead all humans to be engaged in becoming better expressions of perfect humanity and helping others become the same through entering into a closer communion with the Creator. Well, when we read the stories about Jesus' sayings and actions in the first 4 books of the New Testament scriptures in this light, I can see this Jesus figure explicitly and deliberately opposing the beliefs and acts of what the Judaist religious tradition had become, that the prophets had called out and that had dehumanized many in their communities through deprivation, exclusion, marginalization, and dogmatism. The theme of Jesus' words and actions shows a strong commitment to provision, inclusion, incorporation, and openness to other perspectives on previously non-negotiable beliefs. I think probably was about the same time as I wrote that Easter pamphlet, I became captivated by what I consider to be one of the strongest calls in the Judeo-Christian scriptures for the followers of Jesus to be engaged in the enterprise of humanizing others and themselves. And this is found in words in the first of the 4 Gospels in the New Testament scriptures, in Matthew, in chapter 25, and from verses 31 through to 46, we have there the account of Jesus as a judge. And he's portrayed as a judge excluding from an eternity in the presence of the Creator those who simply believed the right things but dehumanized others. And that spoke to me. It suddenly sort of gelled. Hang on. I grew up in a tradition where right belief was the test of spirituality and acceptance and eventual entry into this world beyond that was going to be perfect. And here, the founder of this supposed tradition is portrayed as saying, I don't care if you believe the right things. If you've treated your fellow human beings as less than human, then sorry, you don't join in this supposed eternity with the Creator forever. And those who appeared not to believe the right things, but manifestly engaged in Jesus' humanizing enterprise, were welcomed into this imagined eternity. And I guess, folks, that's why I've ended up being a humanizing follower of Jesus. And that's who I am today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mel. It's provocative, and I think much of what you said will resonate with us. When you and I had the exchange, I pointed out the first 2 principles in of our 7 principles, and how the direct focus on humanizing the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and love and compassion in our relationships as well. So, really nice. It is now time to extinguish the chalice. Rachel, if I could ask you, and Paul, if I could ask you to put the words to extinguishing the chalice on the screen. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Rachel. My closing words are by Dana Worsnop, who is the minister of the UU Church in Ventura, California. And the words are entitled, "I Want to Be with People." Often people say they love coming to a place with so many like-minded people. I know what they're getting at, and I also know they aren't getting it quite right. I don't want to be with a bunch of people who are just like me. I want to be in a beloved community where I don't have to think like everyone else to be loved or to be eligible for salvation. I want to be with people who value compassion, justice, love, and truth, though they have different thoughts and opinions about all sorts of things. I want to be with independent-minded people of good heart. I want to be with people who have many names and no name at all for God. I want to be with people who see in me goodness and dignity, and who also see my failings and foibles, and who still love me. I want to be with people who feel their interconnection with all existence and let it guide their footfalls upon the earth. I want to be with people who see life as a paradox and don't always rush to resolve it. I want to be with people who are willing to walk the tightrope that is life and will hold my hand as I walk mine. I want to be with people who let church call them into a different way of being in the world. I want to be with people who support, encourage, and even challenge each other to higher and more ethical living. I want to be with people who inspire one another to follow the call of the Spirit. I want to be with people who covenant to be honest, engaged, and kind, and strive to keep their promises and hold me to the promises I make. I want to be with people who give of themselves, who share their hearts and minds and gifts. I want to be with people who know that human community is often warm and generous, sometimes challenging, and almost always a grand adventure. In short, I want to be with people like you. So we have another treat as a prelude that Roy is going to play our organ for us on a prelude. I think it is something from Handel's Messiah, but Roy's nodding to me. So, sorry, Postlude, thank you. After the postlude that Roy plays, we'll put a discussion question on the board and have a few minutes for discussion, and then morning tea after that. Over to you, Roy. Came up with these questions because, Mal's talk was about, in Mal's view of things, Jesus was fundamentally humanizing in his teaching and an example, and yet people have, in many cases, his supposed followers have gotten away from that. Our principles are also fundamentally humanizing, and my question here is about to what degree do we live up to those, or how do we live up to those? So what can we do as individuals and as a community to live the humanizing values in our faith? And what are some good examples?